Hey everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the podcast. We're going over the UFC 235 card on this episode, obviously, as it's titled. And, we're going to look at some other stuff. We'll look at some news. We'll look at the Holloway and Dustin Poirier matchup, kind of where that leaves Tony Ferguson in the whole mix. Adesanya and Gastelum. We'll talk about the fights last weekend. And we'll break down the fights coming up this weekend. So hope you guys enjoy. Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mixed Martial Analysis, where we're going to be breaking down the UFC 235 card that's coming up this Saturday. It's headlined by Jon Jones and Anthony Smith. You got, most people consider Jon Jones the reigning defending champion of the light heavyweight division, regardless of what happened with DC. I think there's still a lot of people who view Jon as never having lost the title and never having really lost a fight. I mean, his one, whatever you want to call it, right, his one loss was disqualification because of a noon to 6 elbow. So whether you think that loss was deserving or not probably depends on how you feel about the noon to 6 elbow rule. I don't know. But he definitely wasn't losing the fight. Like, in no way was the other guy in control. Anyway, fighting a big underdog in Anthony Smith, a guy who has double the experience of Jon. Actually, he has a lot of fights, and he's really been finding his footing lately in the light heavyweight division. He's got a lot of power, and that's one of the things that I've always wanted to see Jon face, is kind of someone with that really explosive power. Like, not that the guys that he's fought in the past, like Rampage, don't have it, but like Anthony Johnson type power, like Rumble Johnson type, like game-changing fight altering power. And that's one of the reasons I always wanted to see him fight Rumble, because I thought Rumble represented a real threat. And don't get me wrong, I know that Jon's a master, and like if he's fighting Anthony Johnson, he's going to be just like when he's fighting Anthony Smith this weekend. He's aware of what they bring to the table, so he's going to account for it. I'm not saying that, but Jon does get hit sometimes, and when guys like Anthony Johnson hit you, and maybe Anthony Smith, it does something different. So don't get me wrong, Anthony Smith has a tall task in front of him, but there are some things that make this fight interesting. But before we get into breaking the actual card down, let's go ahead and get through some news and some, let's go over the wins, some notable wins from this past weekend at UFC on ESPN Plus 3. The first one, obviously, is Thiago Santos knocking out Jan Blachowicz. That's a big win because I think Jan was ranked like number 4. Thiago Santos already has a win at middleweight, I believe, but over Anthony Smith, the guy fighting for the title this weekend. So, the question is, where does Santos go next? Does he fight for the title? Or do you make him go through a guy like Gustafsson? Or maybe have Rockhold. Rockhold wants to come up to 205 and he's calling him out. Maybe have those guys square off. And, Santos just beat the number 4 guy. Luke Rockhold is a big name. He's obviously fought the elite of the elite at middleweight. There's no reason not to schedule a fight with Santos, because if you look at it, you could do Gustafsson versus Santos, and that probably makes more sense if you consider like the landscape of the light heavyweight division, right? Because, Gustafsson's arguably the second best in the division now that DC's bumped up the heavyweight, and if he's going to remain there, right? I don't know. I think Santos is kind of in like a complicated spot. I think what's probably going to happen is he's going to fight Rockhold. That's what I think. And I think it should happen because Rockhold's a big name. And if he can beat a guy like Santos, he deserves to be in that top 3 conversation, obviously. So I think you could make that a title eliminator, because the problem is if you make Gustafsson Santos and Gustafsson beats Santos, no one's going to want to see Jon Jones versus Gustafsson 3, not after the way that Jon beat him in the last fight. Piotr Jan. I've heard his name pronounced so many fucking different ways. Petr, Piotr. I heard John Anik say Piotr, so I'm trusting John Anik because that motherfucker has said shit in order, I feel like. So I'm going with his pronunciation. He picked up a big win over John Dodson. And I thought that Dan Hardy, when he was commentating, made a great point in that fight. And that, like, if you looked, every time that Petr Yan committed like a foul or did something, Dodson was constantly calling it out and looking at the ref like, man, I understand that you want the rules enforced correctly, but if he's not doing it, like, you can't sit there and try to talk the ref into it. You got to engage in the fight, especially when you got a guy like Yan who's super aggressive. I mean, you got to stay focused. And the difference was, like, if there were little slip-ups, Yan didn't, like, on Dodson's end, like, a little bit of sloppiness. Like, you know what, Yan never complained about it the way Dodson did. He just kept fucking fighting. And he's a real threat, man. John Dodson is high level. Don't forget. And he's very fast. And the way that Yan was just able to, or Petr Yan was able to apply pressure was just, extremely impressive. Especially because going into this fight, I thought one of the problems for Petr was going to be that Dodson is very quick and he counters well and he can get out of the way of things quickly. But he was able to he kept cutting him off, and he wasn't following him. He was constantly cutting angles and changing things up, and he looked brilliant. He's undoubtedly someone to keep your eye on at 135 pounds. Moving on, Adesanya versus Gastelum is announced for the interim middleweight title, 185 pounds. And this is one of the situations where I was against the interim title at first. And I still kind of am. But it kind of makes sense in this situation because you've got a guy in Robert Whittaker who's your champion. He's going to be out for a while, and you're trying to sort out who's going to fight for the title next. But in my eyes, isn't that just a fucking number one contender bout? Isn't that what it is? That's what we're talking about here, right? The guy who wins this fight is going to fight the real champion. That's a contender. That's a title eliminator. That's what that is. Call it whatever you want. Slap the interim bout on it. Sell your pay-per-views. However the fuck you want to do it. But it's a title eliminator bout. Everybody knows that whoever wants to lay claim to being the king of the 185-pound division is going to have to go through Robert Whittaker. That's just how it's going to have to go. So I don't see. From an advertising perspective, I get it. And now you've handed out so many interim belts that fuck it. There's probably going to be one in every division. But that's a great fight. It's a great stylistic matchup because Gastelum's a really good boxer, pretty good grappler, and Adesanya is pretty good at defending the takedown. He has a lot of length and a lot of reach on Gastelum. So, you see, if you look at Stylebender's fight against, I think it was Vettori, right? That Italian dude that he fought. He was able to tag him sometimes, and Gastelum has really good footwork, and he might have a little bit more crafty ways to get inside on him, He's going to fight a different style of fight than like Anderson Silva fought against Stylebender. And the question is who's going to be able to utilize their tools, and is Adesanya going to be able to keep Gastelum on the end of his punches, you know what I mean, and defend the takedowns, and because I think Gastelum's going to have to make Adesanya work and think a lot in that fight in order to win it. Speaking of interim titles, the UFC 236 is going to be the first card in UFC history with 2 interim titles on it. So we just talked about Adesanya and Gastelum. Max Holloway is going to be fighting Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title, 155 pounds. So that's a great fucking fight. Don't get me wrong. It's a big rematch. Dustin Poirier armbarred Max Holloway in Max's UFC debut, I think it was. When Max was like 19 years old or some shit. So Max wants to get this one back, and it's a good fight. Both guys are aggressive. They're going to bring the fight to each other. It's going to be a fan-friendly fight for sure. But it kind of leaves you wondering, where does Tony Ferguson stand in this mix? Because you kind of thought that logically he was going to be the next in line to fight Khabib, like everyone wanted that fight. And I think what happened is he turned down an interim title because he fought for an interim title once against Kevin Lee already and didn't get anything for it. Saw nothing for it at all. Was stripped of it or whatever after he hurt himself whatever fucking happened there, right? So I understand why he doesn't want to take another interim title. It kind of makes sense. But he in this situation, the way, especially now that Conor's not the champion, now that Khabib is the champion, yes, he's suspended, but Khabib is going to try to defend his belt probably. And probably on a more consistent basis than Conor would have. So, Ferguson, I don't know if there's a good chance that he might have fucked himself, because he might have also been banking. He's like, well, fuck that. In the meantime, let those two fight for the interim title. I know the interim title doesn't mean shit. Maybe I can get a matchup with Conor, but I don't know if Conor's going to want the fight. That's the problem. You know, and Conor's, when you're negotiating with Conor, you have to keep in mind, like, all the fucking time that Conor's in control. Like, whatever he wants to do, he could back out. He could do this. He could change things up on you. Like, he was calling out Cowboy, or said he would fight Cowboy, and then all of a sudden he's also saying that he'll fight, like, Nate Diaz on the same card that Silva and Nick Diaz fight. Which, by the way, how fucking great would the pay-per-view numbers be on that? You get Silva versus Nick Diaz, and then Nate Diaz versus Conor 3. Whoo! It would be a fun card, don't get me wrong, but my point is, like, Cowboy, I think Cowboy talked about how he knew this too, but, like, Conor's a wild card. Like, he'll say one thing and, like, you know, you never know what you're going to get with him. And he's always in control of the situation in reality, you know what I mean? All right, I think now we can move on to the main. If I missed some stuff, leave it in the comments. If you got questions about anything, leave it in the comments, and I'll get to it on the next show. But let's get on to the main card. First, we've got a really good fight in the bantamweight division, an important fight between Cody Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz. And this is big because, I mean, is Cody going to be able to rebound after coming off those 2 losses to TJ Dillashaw? I think the problem is with the last TJ fight is that Cody was so emotionally invested in the first fight, and then he almost finished TJ, so he felt like he almost got him, and it was just like a matter of the bell saving him, right? And then TJ comes out and finishes him in the second round, like rebounds from being wobbled and rocked and everything, and comes out and finishes Cody. So you know Cody was itching to get that back. But Cody's young. I mean, he's only got, this is going to be his, I think, 14th fight of his career, which is, I mean, it's nothing to, like, you know, turn your nose at or anything, but he doesn't have the most experience, and he's obvious. Like, if you watch his interviews and stuff, Cody's a fucking hothead. It's part of what makes him good. That aggression that he's able to bring to the octagon. I mean, he packs real knockout power, and it works in a lot of his fights. It plays into his personality kind of favors his style. They play into each other. I think it's great, but when you get someone like that who's emotionally invested, especially when you're fighting someone elite like TJ, who sets things up the way TJ does. I mean, if you look at their first fight, you know, when TJ rebounded, Cody was dropping his right hand, like, occasionally, and TJ finally landed a head kick. And at the end of towards the end there, TJ was throwing some feints and stuff, and Cody started biting on it because he was trying to, you know what I mean? He's trying to figure out what the fuck's going on, and then TJ moves to the right, which could mean a setup for left head kick, right? That you just got fucking whacked with earlier. So Cody's response is to come straight down the fucking pipe with the right hand, and TJ, instead of throwing the kick, sits down on it and comes over top of Cody's left with the right and knocks him the fuck out, you know? So you get to see, like, in that first fight, you get a good representation of how elite TJ striking is and how he can draw people into traps, and how, you know, he had Cody a little bit confused, I feel like, and biting on some things, you know? Whereas Cody really finds success when he waits for people to come to him, when they come into his range and he lights them up. Like, that's why he was so effective against Dominic Cruz, because Cruz is constantly, like, usually moving backwards and moving out of the way of guys, and you know, cutting these weird angles and hitting people and getting out. But if you look at what really made Cody successful in the Dominic Cruz fight, was his ability to just sit in the fucking pocket, be patient, and make Cruz come to him. And when Cruz attacked, Cody was constantly firing back immediately, and always getting the better of Cruz in those exchanges. And he exposed a flaw with Cruz's style. And I mean, you're talking about a kid who at the time had, 11 fights to his name, and he came in and beat the greatest bantamweight of all time. So to deny that Cody's, I mean, extremely talented is ridiculous. But his most recent fight, don't put too much fucking stock into it. You're talking about a kid who was coming back, trying to get revenge. And TJ threw the same fucking right hand 3 times before he knocked Cody down with it initially and hurt him in their most recent fight. You know, so it's like, Cody obviously was like not picking up on things, getting too aggressive. I didn't like that fight for him. And now he's going to be fighting a guy in Pedro Munoz. He's ranked number 8 in the world. He's 17-3. And his only losses have come against, I think, like John Dodson, Rafael Assunção, and maybe one more like Jimmy Rivera. I could be wrong on that. Someone check me on that if you're watching this. But he's a black belt, high level, and he's a little more traditional in his stances than guys like Cody's seen recently, like TJ and Cruz, who utilize a lot of fancy footwork and a lot of movement. You'll find that Munoz is a little more traditional in the things that he does. Not that it's not effective. He's very good. I mean, he's got a decent number of knockouts on his record as well as submissions. He's dangerous everywhere. But I think when he gets into the pocket with Cody, Cody's hands are going to be faster and his boxing is going to be more crisp. So for me, the key to this fight, I think Cody actually has to be aggressive, because if Munoz is able to like push the pace at all and start engaging in clinches and stuff, that's where I think he's going to have an advantage. So I think that Cody has to maintain the center of the octagon, use good footwork, use good head movement. Don't take Munoz lightly, because he can still box. He's still got good Muay Thai. He's still well-rounded, no doubt. But I really think that for him to win a fight like this against Cody, he's going to have to go to the ground. Because like I said, I just think, I don't know if Munoz has the footwork to deal with Cody on the feet. Cody has really good footwork too. Like if you look at what he was doing against Cruz, it wasn't just that he was, waiting for him to come in. It was the way that he was slipping his head off the center line and throwing the right combos at the right time and constantly tagging him. So I don't like Munoz's chances on the feet over an extended period of time at all. I think this fight, whatever way it goes, is going to end in a finish. But I think you're going to get Cody Garbrandt second round KO. I think Cody's going to come out a little more patient just because of his last fight. You're going to see him exercise, but at some point he's going to get him, I think. He's got really fast hands, and I think he's going to be able to fend off some of those takedowns and keep him at bay. Keep him at the end of his punches and not let him get in and let Munoz engage in his grappling. I don't think he's going to just allow that to happen. So, like I said, I think the key for Cody is controlling the center of the octagon, and the key for Pedro Munoz is to, back Cody up with the pressure if you can, and start threatening level changes, get him up against the cage, engage in some grappling in the clinch, and see if you have an advantage there. And mixing things up well, too. Like, Cody will kick, but it's not exactly a strong suit, right? So if you can mix some kicks in there and diversify your game, I think it helps your chances, too. But I like Cody in this fight. Great fight, though. I mean, and you got to think, Cody has been fighting, he hasn't been fighting guys like Pedro Munoz or Rafael Assunção or Marlon Moraes or Jimmy Rivera. He came up and he had a big win over a rising contender in Thomas Almeida. And then he beat someone else. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. But, he doesn't have a long list of top 10 guys in his name. So it's interesting to see him kind of, to me, I think it's great to see him get to fight all this talent at 135. 135 is one of the deepest divisions in the UFC, without a doubt. All right, next fight on the card is number 7 ranked Tecia Torres fighting Weili Zhang. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But Tecia Torres is coming off 2 tough losses to 2 of the best women in the division. Joanna, the former strawweight champion of the world, before she lost to Rose, right? Her reign was incredible. She beat Andrade. And Andrade, who was fighting for the title against Rose, I think, next. I think that's what's going on. I don't know if that's officially announced or anything, but I would imagine that's the next move. So her last win came against Michelle Waterson in a tough fight in Detroit in 2017. So she's going to be looking to pick up her first win in, not a little over a year now, right? And she's got really good striking. And the thing that worries me about Tecia Torres in this fight is that you saw her throw up like an armbar on the wrong side in her fight against, I can't remember what fight it was in. It might have been Jessica Andrade. But it's going to bother me that I can't remember the fight. If anyone knows what fight it is, let me know. But she throws up an armbar on the wrong side. And on the other side of this fight, you've got Weili Zhang, who just tapped out Jessica Aguilar, brown belt, in the first round with an armbar. So, and engaged in the clinch, and like it looked like Aguilar was going to control the position for a little bit, and then she reversed it, took her down, and fucking just dominated her on the ground. And her striking's pretty good, but more like attacks from distance a little bit, and kind of like staying at range and then coming in, like, you know what I mean? Kind of blitzing and getting out. Couple strikes and getting out. That's, I think, where she finds the most success in her striking game. Whereas for Torres, who's going to be a little bit shorter and stockier, she's going to have to get inside and work inside and throw some combos. And I think if you look at Weili Zhang's fight against Danielle Taylor, who's kind of a similar build to Tecia Torres, not exactly the same, but a little bit shorter, you know, a little bit smaller, Danielle Taylor was able to land some shots on Zhang. So I really think that Torres can find some success if she can get into some close boxing exchanges. Break out of the clinch if you can. Don't get involved in these long like clinch battles where she could possibly get a takedown, because I think her ground game is very impressive. I think she might be able to overwhelm Torres if this goes to the ground. But I'm going with Zhang. I just think at some point, like, Weili Zhang, is it Zhang or Zhang? Someone correct me on that if you know how to pronounce it. I just think she's going to have an advantage in the grappling department. At some point, she's going to be able to close that space off. And on the feet, she does a good job of managing distance as well. And she might get tagged with something, but I just don't know if Torres is going to have enough like firepower in her hands to overcome all the things that Weili Zhang is going to be able to present, you know, because she's going to be controlling distance as well. She might get tagged with some things. Like, you might see her get hit, but I think all in all, Weili's probably going to get this, like, fight into the clinch, somehow drag it to the ground and get her out of there. I think you might see Tecia Torres' ground game get exposed a little bit in this fight, you know. But for Torres, the key is to avoid the takedown, avoid those clinch situations, and try to keep it at boxing range, and, you know, utilize some kicks, some leg kicks to slow down her movement and her ability to shoot on you. You know, you're going to have to be mixing your striking up, changing. I mean, that's pretty consistent. That's good advice for almost every fight. So that's kind of fucking stupid for me to say. Like, you shouldn't just be going to one part of the body over, unless they're not defending it. Like, you'll see some guys just not defend leg kicks. And then you'll see it like makes sense to go to that same body part over and over and over, right? But when you've got someone like Weili who's going to be, you know, elusive, very crafty, I think you're going to have to diversify things in order to have success. The next fight is a big one between Robbie Lawler, who's ranked number 6 in the welterweight division right now, and Ben Askren. And Robbie's been alternating losses lately. He most recently got beat up by Rafael dos Anjos, where he just mauled him. I mean, he tore his leg up, and Robbie's toughness really showed through in that fight, if you didn't already fucking know how tough Robbie Lawler was. Before that, picked up a win over Donald Cerrone, and then before that, you know, lost the title to Tyron Woodley when he got knocked out in the first round. So Robbie's had such a storied career. I mean, when, you know, he knocked out Nick Diaz, like, coming up, and that's how long he's been fighting. Like, back in, you know, I don't even know when it was. He's been fighting well over 10 years now. Well, I want to see when his fight against Nick Diaz was. But my point is that Robbie has been around for forever. And he's been competing consistently, even at the age that he's at now. Like, he's 36 years old, you know. He's still fighting pretty consistently. He's taken some time off since his last loss, which I think was a smart move. I mean, he got battered in that fight. That was a rough fight. Like, he took a beating. And one sec, I've got to pull it up here. I gotta fucking search Nick Diaz. 2004, 15 fucking years ago. So, I mean, Robbie's been doing it a long time, you know, and obviously held the welterweight title. He's beaten guys like Rory McDonald, Johnny Hendricks, who that's going to be an important factor to keep in mind. Keep in mind that Robbie Lawler has a win over Johnny Hendricks, who maybe his wrestling isn't on the caliber that Ben Askren's is, but still pretty fucking elite. And Johnny Hendricks was looking like a world beater at the time. Like, that, actually, when he lost to Robbie Lawler, I think he picked up a win over Matt Brown, but then his career really started to fall off. And I don't know what the reason for is. You can speculate about that all you want, but the point is Robbie Lawler's seen high-level wrestling, and the thing about Robbie is he's relentless, and he's like, his nickname is Ruthless, right? That accurately describes this motherfucker. He's also explosive. He's aware. He's never just giving you things. And I think that's going to be important to fight against a guy who's going to have to work really hard for takedowns. Like Ben Askren, you know where this fight is. You know where Ben wants to take this fight. You know, it's no fucking secret. He's one of the best wrestlers in the world. He's never lost a fight. He's 18-0. And I don't want to like knock Ben Askren or any of his credentials. He's obviously brilliant, and he doesn't take damage, and he dominates almost everybody that he fights, like completely dominates them. But arguably the most relevant name on his resume right now is Douglas Lima, and they haven't fought since like 2012 or 2013. And Robbie's been fighting the best of the best for a long fucking time now. Like, he's seen it all, you know? And for me, regardless of what Ben Askren has accomplished, and I'm a fan, I think he's great. Like, I'm not rooting against him or anything. Like, I think he's great for the UFC. I think he's a great mouthpiece for them. You get these great sound bites out of him. He's great for marketing, and he's a great fighter. But I think this is a tough fight for Ben Askren. I think Robbie is fucking, like, he's not just going to hand you takedowns. He's going to be hitting you in the fucking mouth. He's going to be making things dirty. I think he's going to be able to get back to his feet at some point. Like, he's going to be constantly be working, and then if he gets into the striking exchanges with him, I just see him out pointing Ben on the feet. You know? I think that this is an important fight for Ben Askren, though. And he's in an almost must-win situation here because you were lobbying to get into the UFC, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, he should have been in the UFC a long fucking time ago. Back in his Bellator days, like, I think it would have been, I don't understand why they wouldn't bring him in, you know, whether it was a rift between Dana and Bellator or whatever the fuck was going on. He should have been brought in a long time ago. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be here now. He absolutely does. This is a great fight. And I'm not saying he doesn't have a chance. I'm just saying that stylistically, I like Robbie in this fight. I think that Ben, his key to success is going to have to be to get the fight up again. I don't think he's going to be able to take Robbie down in space. You know, I think he's going to have to put the fight up against the cage and really wear on him. And I think that in those situations, Robbie's going to find a way to defend it, make it dirty, get some elbows in there, and just, you know, he might get taken down, but there's never going to be gimmies. And I think he's constantly going to be working, maybe keeping Ben working at a level that he's never seen professionally before. Honestly, that's the type of person you get with Robbie Lawler. So it's going to depend on whether Askren's going to be able to deal with that and keep him held down for 3 rounds, you know. A lot of ifs in this fight. I'm excited to see this one, though. Like, this is a big fucking fight. I'm just excited to see it play out. But I like Robbie Lawler. I like him second round KO. All right, next we have the welterweight championship between Tyron Woodley and number 2 ranked Kamaru Usman, who's coming off a big win over RDA, beat Damian Maia before that, Emil Mech before that. I mean, Usman's 14-1. You know, he's extremely talented. He's a great wrestler. He applies pressure well. And I always kind of say that's kind of your key ingredient against a guy like Woodley. Because think about what you have to do in order to shut him down. You have to close off space, because he's so fucking explosive. And I think, you know, going into the Till fight, I really liked Darren Till in that fight because I thought Till was going to apply pressure. But I think that part of the problem with the way that like Till and Wonderboy fight is that they're bigger guys. They're pretty long. They utilize their range well, and they're able to stab at you from a long distance away. Like, most of the guys they fight, they can hit them at a distance and cover distance and get away from them before their opponents can hit them back, I think. And I think that's a big benefit. Like, they have a great understanding of range. But the problem with that when you fight Tyron Woodley is that he covers more space than a normal human being. He covers more space than most elite UFC fighters. Like, when that motherfucker, like, explodes into that right hand, he can cover, like, half the fucking octagon. He's extremely explosive. You gotta, like, constantly be on alert when you're fighting him. So the key to kind of, you know, beating that down is to eliminate the space. Don't give him room to shoot on you where he's going to have like an advantage to, you know, get the takedowns and stuff. You've got to close him off kind of like Rory McDonald did. And you can't be chasing him around the octagon because then he gets to create angles, right? You got to constantly be heading him off, backing him up against the cage, which, by the way, people do to him, but you got to attack him. And I think guys like, you know, Till and Wonderboy saw danger in attacking him because there is that space there, and his ability to counter is extremely impressive. And he's got a lot of power in that right hand, so it's dangerous. So you don't want to overextend on anything and leave yourself open. So I get it. But Usman fights really, really well at close range. And the question is going to be whether Woodley is going to be able to keep that off him and keep that grappling off of him. Because, I mean, Usman thrives in those dirty types of fights, you know, and he doesn't keep it at the same range that Wonder Boy or Till are going to fight at. He's going to keep it in close, and I think that does a lot to eliminate some of Woodley's weapons. But, I mean, Woodley's a world fucking champion. You know, he knows what Usman's game plan is going to be. He studies tape. He's going to be prepared for it. So, fuck, This is a really fucking good fight in my opinion. And I can see. I'm having a really hard time picking this one because I've picked against Woodley before, like in his last three. I didn't pick Maia over him. I wouldn't do that. But I did pick Thompson both times over him, and I picked Till over him. And I'm kind of leaning towards Usman, but at the same time, I got to think that Woodley's going to come prepared, and I think that he is one of the best in the world, and he's just got a lot of experience, and I think that he's going to be able to pull it off somehow. I don't know how he's going to do it. I don't know how the fight's going to play out, but like, I'll say this. I think that if Tyron Woodley is letting himself get backed up against the cage in this fight, which he has a tendency to do, he's making a big mistake. I don't think he's going to be able to explode off and get those type of knockouts like he got against Darren Till or Wonder Boy, but who fucking knows, maybe. I just think that if he's backing up and he's spending a lot of time with his back against the cage, that's where Usman's going to engage in like grappling contests with him. He's going to be confident in his wrestling, and he's going to land a whole bunch of shots while pushing him up against the cage. So to me, Woodley has to keep this fight in space, you know, utilize his shots and stuff and his ability to like cover distance quickly. We talked about that. He's got to be able to get in and out on punches. He's got to be, to me, he's got kind of the same game plan as we talked about earlier with, Garbrandt and Munoz. Like, I think that in different ways, right? Like Usman's wrestling is obviously very strong, whereas I don't think Munoz is on the level that Usman is in wrestling, but Woodley's got to keep his fucking back off the cage. He's got to be circling the center of the octagon, controlling it, and he can't be letting himself get pushed backwards. He does have a tendency to do that. So we'll see. I'm taking Woodley just because I think he's going to find a way to figure it out, but I'm not discounting Usman. I think this is a great fight, and I think it could go either way, you know. And finally, we get to the main event, light heavyweight championship between John Jones and Anthony Smith. And obviously, John Jones is going to be a big favorite in this fight, right? He's ruled the light heavyweight division, I mean, since he was, 22 years old? Hasn't been beaten. He's never been defeated, let's say that. If he technically has a loss on his record, he's never been beaten. But he's fighting number 3 ranked Anthony Smith, who is 31-13, represents a ton of experience. You know, he just beat Volkan Ozdemir in a really gritty fight, knocked out Shogun before that, knocked out Rashad Evans before that. So, he's got some good wins at light heavyweight, but the problem with those wins is that Rashad Evans and fucking Shogun are obviously a little bit older. Well, you say that, and then you look at Shogun's fight against Tyson Pedro, who I had a lot of confidence in. You know, I think he's promising. I think he's got good movement. He's, and Shogun fucking shut him down. I don't know if Pedro was starstruck or he just got completely outclassed or what the fuck happened, but Shogun's no joke, and Anthony Smith knocked him out. So, but these are guys on the latter ends of their career. They're not young anymore. They're not going to be winning titles anytime soon, realistically. And an impressive win is Volkan Ozdemir, considering like the tear he was on and everything, and he was able to survive some adversity early in the fight and then come back to win. He got a rear naked choke on him in the 3rd round, and that locked up this title fight against John Jones, where I mean you got a guy who is one of the most controversial figures in UFC history, in sports history, honestly. I mean, I don't think there's ever been, maybe if you guys have examples of this, give me, because I'm not as sports savvy, but I can't think of another example in sports where you've got someone who legitimately might be the greatest of all time, and he's kind of lucky in a way because he still gets to fight sometimes. Like, he can go through a process and still fight. And fighting's kind of one of those things where, like, you know, you can get like things are only judged one fight at a time. Whereas, like, if you're not a sports star in another sport, you know, you might have an entire season that you missed, but within that season, like if it's baseball, you missed 160 games. Like, that's a lot of time. Whereas with fighting, like, it's not uncommon to see guys miss a year for injury or something and then fight again. So if you take a suspension for a year, it's not that big of a deal. So I guess it's not exactly the same situation. But I don't know if there's ever been anyone in history with so much talent. Like, John might legitimately be the best ever at his sport. And see him, you know, have so many issues outside of the octagon. It's bizarre. And obviously you hear guys like Joe Rogan talk about this all the time, but it plays into like who he is, right? Like, he's reckless, and it shows in his fighting a little bit, but it works, and it kind of makes him great. I think it kind of makes him obsessed with the sport. You know, he's wild, as people describe him all the time. You know, he's fucking crazy. But he's also, he's extremely good. Like, and that seems like such an obvious statement, but if you look at the way that he fights people in the DC fight, the second DC fight where he knocked him out and it got overturned into a no contest, the way he's just beating up the body over and over and over, and then, you know, kicks him in the head after DC starts dropping his hands to defend the body shot. It's fucking brilliant. And I mean, you're not doing that against some fucking Joe Schmo. You're doing it against Daniel Cormier, who's right now the current heavyweight champion of the world. And then you look at, you know, his first fight against Gustafsson. I think he went into it taking him lightly, thinking that he couldn't be beat. He talks about it. I believe him. I think he went into that fight not fully prepared and not taking Gustafsson as seriously as he should have. But in the second fight, you see John utilizing a lot of kicks to establish range and just keeping Gustafsson at bay. You know, he fought a completely different fight, and Gustafsson fought the same fight. He was trying to box him, and in the first fight, John was engaging in those boxing exchanges, and in the second fight, he wasn't. That was the difference. And then when you're frustrating someone, you can usually lure them into doing, you know, they get a little more aggressive because they're trying to hit you with things and they're getting frustrated. They're trying to figure out what's working. And then he took him down, and once he took him down, it wasn't even fucking close. I mean, he secured position, got on top, and just dominated him. I mean, there was nowhere for Gustafsson to fucking go. So, you know, you're talking about the greatest fighter of all time, in my opinion. I always say, like, it's kind of confusing because I consider, if you're talking about the title of the GOAT, I think about like GSP and DC because they've been such great role models for the sport and accomplished like so much. But as far as pure fighting skill, not taking reputation or anything else into consideration, I think John is the best to ever do it by maybe not a wide margin, but I think he's the best. I really do. I think it's going to be a lot for Smith to overcome, and he could do it, and he's going to be relying on kind of like, he's got a little bit of a different fighting style. It's a little bit unorthodox, and it is explosive. But in my opinion, if you're relying on catching John Jones to win the fight, it's probably not going to be enough. Just being honest. I think John's too good everywhere. You got to remember that he can take this fight to the ground if he wants to. You know, he's probably going to be able to dominate almost every position. And if Anthony Smith's like relying on, you know, maybe closing some space and catching John with something, I don't know if that is his game plan. I'm not saying that's the only thing he can do, but John is like maybe the best in the world at everything. Like you would see him throughout his career put guys in situations where they were known for being like great at. Like Chael Sonnen took him down. Glover Teixeira dirty boxed him. I mean, he does that to people. Like he's like, oh, you're good at this. Well, I'm better at it. You know. So Anthony Smith brings undeniable knockout power to this fight, but I just don't think it's going to be enough to overcome. And I think John's going to get him out of there in like probably like the second or third round again. I think you're going to see a lot of finishes on this card, maybe all of them. Honestly, I mean, especially considering the fact that like Woodley and Usman are going 5 rounds. I think that might have potential to be your fight of the night because of like if Usman's going to be constantly applying pressure, it's going to be different than the way Wonderboy applied it. Like Wonderboy applied it cautiously and Till kind of applied it cautiously. I don't think Usman's going to apply it cautiously. I think it's going to be gritty. I think it's going to be dirty, and we're going to get to see how Woodley responds because they're going to get into some situations, and I think they're going to get into a lot of interesting grappling situations and clinch work, and it's going to be a really fucking good fight. I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have been disappointed with Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington. I do think he kind of got fucked over, regardless of what you think about Colby, but admittedly, as a fan, I would rather see this fight, so I'm glad it's happening. I think that's all we got. I think, I think we did a good job. I probably did some rambling in there a couple times, went off the track a little bit, but I think we got everything covered. So if you guys have questions, drop them, and I'll try to get to them in the next episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the podcast. Just to recap real quickly, I'm taking Cody Garbrandt. I'm taking Weili Zhang, Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, and John Jones. So, you got. I think this is a great card. And then don't forget, like, on the prelims, like, let's go through the prelims real quick. They're going to be for free on ESPN. And you got Zabit versus Jeremy Stevens, Misha Serkinov versus Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker's the guy to keep your eye on. Alejandro Perez versus Cody Stamann, and Mickey Gall versus Diego Sanchez. So even the prelims for this fucking fight card are stacked. It's going to be a great fight. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think depending on what I got going on, I think I might go live for the co-main and main event and just do some alternate commentary. So keep your eyes out for that. I'll give a heads up on like Instagram or something if I do it. And thank you. Drop a like, comment, subscribe. If you are listening on YouTube, we're also available on iTunes. And if you're on iTunes, you can also find us on YouTube if you prefer to watch a video or prefer to listen to only the audio. So, all right. Thank you. Bye-bye.